Hello, and welcome to Label Sessions Presents. Label Sessions is a global platform that connects you to the best advice from the most interesting people, whether you want advice, mentoring, or ideas. I'm Josh Nixon, content producer for Label Sessions. In this episode, Nick Sherrard of Label Sessions talks to Nick Scott. Nick is a leader in public and social innovation, leading initiatives at the Government of Canada before now heading ShiftFlow Innovation and Design. With a passion for collaborative problem solving, Nick is dedicated to driving positive societal impact and inspiring the next generation of innovators. Nick, Sherrard that is, talks to him to find out more.
Let's actually make a start. So, Nick, it'd be lovely, rather than me doing a hackneyed job of trying to introduce your story, why don't you introduce yourself and what are you known for?
So, around these parts, so I live in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. It's the capital city of our province. I've spent my career working in the social sector, in social innovation, in the academic sector, with government, and then inside government, both at the provincial and federal level, and more recently, internationally. And I think I'm probably known for open government and innovation around here, around these parts.
And how have you found those different worlds or those different environments, anyway, being in academia to being in government itself? How have you found, what's different and what's the same across those spaces?
Yeah, there's so many similarities, actually. But I think all governments have their idiosyncrasies, as well as all sectors. My role has always been in helping people help people, right? So in the social sector, it's about creating systems and processes and building a culture where people can deliver value and help people help others solve problems. That's kind of the similar thing across the board, right? Whether you're in the social sector or you're in government, your role is to help people. Your role is to create value for the public. Your role is to help solve problems. And the way we go about that might differ across organizations and sectors, but that's kind of the connecting tissue.
Yeah, it's an interesting framing because I guess you'll have been, well, I know you will have been because of the academic background and things. If you go into kind of business schools or design schools and things to talk about innovation, it tends to be that people coming through those backgrounds have quite a view around policy and process and capability building and these kind of things. You're framing innovation very much as a people role, helping people do things. So do you think your approach is somewhat different than you see other people doing those kind of roles, or do you think it's just kind of misunderstood in the way it's spoken about on the outside world?
Oh man, I feel like yes and no. Yes, in that I think sometimes we focus on the thing, like we want to do create something new. That's what we want to do, but we pay less attention to everything that is required to make that happen, to like scale the new thing or to create something that actually works. And when you work inside government or even in the nonprofit sector, which is often funded by government, so it replicates many of the same processes, and it's kind of an extension of government in some ways. You find that as much as you want to create the new thing and do things differently, you have to work backwards to the policy. And, if the policy is preventing you from doing something, or the process, the culture, the incentives, so I feel like I kind of followed the cookie crumbs from being at the front line of service delivery in the social sector, being like, we need to do something better. And then when you try to do something better, you run into a barrier. So then you follow that and you follow that. And I followed it all the way into the central government.
Okay, interesting. But do you think that you're more effective because if you like, haven't just done central government or something, like the fact you've been in these different environments doing that, then that's helps you?
100%. I think because you get exposed to many different perspectives and cultures, like organizational cultures and otherwise. And that can help you think differently about problems and about the ways of working. I think, our organizational structures and the ways we work are often taken for granted or treated as, untouchable, right? We don't really often consider that there could be a different way of working. And if we really want to get, radically different outcomes, we're not going to get them by working in the ways we've always worked. And so how do you do that?
So one of the things, without going fully into my Hackneyed backstory for you, but one of the things that is interesting is you've been one in these different types of organizations, but you've also been in a role which is explicitly the innovation role, being the kind of innovation leader in an organization. And one of two times, I think, the first time someone's had the innovation job title in the organization that you're in. So how did you find that experience, and what advice would you have for other people that might be in that position of being the innovation person in an organization that hasn't had one in the past?
Oh, I love that question. Because I've been referred to as like the pet Sisyphus of government, where you're just like the job is just to roll the boulder up the hill, guys, and that's it, Um, but and that is sometimes true. It's because we create these titles, right? Whether it's chief digital officer, chief experience officer, chief innovation officer, and then that's pretty where it ends. We don't fully resource the work. We may give a mandate, but we don't back it up. We may give money, but no mandate. And so I would say first thing is whoever's doing the hiring and the creation of the position needs to take into consideration that there's a larger piece of work. It's not just hiring one person or a small team. And if you find yourself in that position where you are a chief officer of let's change the way we do things, then I found bootstrapping works really well. I feel like taking that entrepreneurial approach works really well. Because when I found myself as the executive director of open government and innovation with no budget, but I had a mandate from the executive council office, what I did was I just started small, right? And I think like we take that for granted. Because when your job is transformation, you kind of want to like operate at scale immediately. And that's probably what I would have done with the budget. And in some ways, I kind of appreciate the constraint that I had, which forced me to start at the very beginning of, all right, let's see how we might, improve people's innovation and design literacy in government and start to draw, create a pull and a demand for the work. And that worked really well. We ended up actually scaling quite rapidly. Whereas I think if we started with the big thing, it can kind of collapse in on itself.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's interesting. I think it'd be interesting for people to hear you use the word bootstrapping within a public sector context, because I guess you're kind of using the mandate to generate demand from people who might not know. At the point you land, they don't know that they want a new way of doing things or a new approach, but you're kind of creating something that creates a sort of magnetic to them. Is that what you mean by bootstrapping?
That's right. With no money. Right. And so, yeah, I think others who have been in similar positions in any kind of organizational transformation and in the public sector where the scale is just enormous, you may find yourself in a situation where the top level of the organization wants to see a certain change. So you have the mandate. And then you find the frontline and the folks who are in delivery also want to see a change. But somehow they're not aligning. And so the bootstrapping, that constraint that I had, forced me to actually work more with the lower levels of the organization and middle management to generate that demand and bring them into the same room together. And I think without that constraint, I may not have done that.
It's interesting. I'm going to play this back to you because it's a theory, but you may think it's wrong. But it's interesting in terms of quite often one of the things that's attractive about innovation roles to lots of people is that they are quite unconstrained as job specs. It's kind of, they can look across the organization. But actually the people that are successful in doing them tend to put the discipline of constraint around themselves. But like it sounds like you have, instead of like, okay, so I don't have a big budget, so I'm going to find ways of proving things really small in a way that will generate demand. So actually your day-to-day work was quite constrained because you put that limit on yourself. It's an interesting shift.
Yeah. And then you end up creating a movement within the organization. And I think this is where my background in social movements was really helpful to me, in that, these things don't happen, as like a revolutionary thing. There's like an organizing, there's a relationship building, there's education, there's trying new things, and creating that space, I think, was really powerful.
That's an interesting thing. Can you bring that to life a little bit? Because I guess the counter argument would be, so if I dropped into most MBA programs I've gone and spoken to, and they took on this thing of maybe introducing innovation capability or design thinking, like you spoke about before, their kind of standard approach would be, right, I'm going to create the big book of how we do design thinking in this company. I'm going to go and get the chief exec to allocate a budget, and I'm going to roll out a managed change program over the next 24 months. And I think what you're saying is that's the wrong approach, but what's the other approach? Well, what's the alternative way of doing it?
I think that there are elements of what you just said that you have to do. I think that what you're describing in some ways could be seen as creating the infrastructure for the change, right? Whether like it's the policy, it's obviously the resourcing, it's all of that, the direction, the prioritization, et cetera. You need that kind of mission oriented innovation, but you also need the bottom up innovation as well. It's not just about implementing or pushing a change on the organization that you're in. You need to it's really more about adoption than anything, because what you're asking is for people to adopt new behaviors, new tools, new ways of doing.
Your history, well, one of the things I want to draw out here is actually one of the job titles you had, which clearly has innovation in the role. It also has open government, and I think that's understood in some parts of the world and others not so much. So tell us about open government, what that means and what that meant you were doing in practice.
So open government, the way that I define it is that it's a government that is transparent, which I think most people understand that as being open government, as in it's a government that pushes information and data out to the world. So this is what we have. This is how we do things. So it's just you can take a look inside and see how it's working. But it's also participatory in that it's engaging the outside world in the work, right? It's pulling in information and data to make better decisions and build better programs and create better policies. The third and more difficult part, but I think this is where the magic happens, is a collaborative government. A government that sort of extends its capabilities and capacity to non-government actors, right? To civil society, to academia, private sector, obviously, and in collaborative ways works to solve big problems and create public value.
This podcast is brought to you by Label Sessions, the global platform that connects you to the best advice from the most interesting people. Around the world, we work with brands to connect their people to true leaders, just like the people you hear on this podcast, for live sessions of advice, mentoring, or sometimes to collaborate on ideas. To find out more, visit labelsessions.com and book in for a demo with our team.
Yes, an interesting thing. So, and in terms of building that more collaborative model of government, I mean, that's quite a fundamental shift in technology around data and things, some aspects of that, but also in terms of culture and the way people think. What were some of the big challenges you had taking on that kind of mandate?
Yeah, I mean, that actually started for me when I was working at the university, because I was running an organization called the Social Policy Research Network, which sounds kind of boring on its surface, but the mission of the network was actually to advance a networked governance approach to government and public engagement. And it was actually there that we found the real challenge of government doesn't habitually collaborate within itself, let alone with the outside world. We're used to government consulting, right? We're used to government asking for opinions, public opinion surveys and these types of things. But when it comes to actually having the civil service or the public service working with folks from the outside in meaningful ways, it doesn't really happen. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. We speak a different language. We have, we kind of different backgrounds, different incentives, et cetera, et cetera. And what we realized was we need to create space and a practice for facilitating that kind of collaboration, which is how we got into this world of public and social innovation labs, and social labs. And so we created a new lab, which was the first public and social innovation lab in the province, to start to build that practice, so that you bring people together, and rather than allow them to default to their habitual ways of working. You have to facilitate them through it. You have to coach them through it to learn a new thing. That really connects with my own kind of theory of change, which is that what we practice, we become. And so if you can create space for people to practice in new and meaningful ways, that will change the way they do things in their everyday life.
I was glad you came out to the theory of change there. It must be an interesting leadership challenge as well, because I do think there's something about limited experience, some experience of this myself. I've seen it in other people. I think one of the things that's really hard or challenging to lead is to lead people to collaborate better, because in some ways that's something you can't solve. You can't do the thing. You can't do the thing for them. If it's just about executing something, you can maybe find a way to execute faster and you can solve the problem. It's something that's about how people collaborate. I mean, how did you find yourself? I mean, there must be some big barriers you face into at various times. How do you practice that so that you can be it?
Of course, I think kind of back to the social movement side of things, and even the diffusion of innovation theories. These things helped me work through a lot of those barriers. When I started applying and thinking about the Rogers diffusion of innovation curve, this curve that basically demonstrates how technologies are diffused throughout society. You have the smallest portion of the group are innovators, and then you have early adopters who want to be part of the innovation story. And when I started thinking about it in that way, it aligns very well with social movements, different social movement ways of thinking. That helped me avoid trying to scale big right away, and just kind of creating the space for innovators and early adopters to work together to model new ways of doing, to adopt new practices so that they can show that early majority, right, the value of doing the thing. Because the early majority won't come on board until they see something has value, right? The late majority doesn't come on board until they have support to do it. So if you don't have the infrastructure in your organization, you're not going to get them. You're not going to get the change that you desire. So that was kind of my theory going in. How I addressed the barriers. I mean, one of the biggest barriers was taking the time to do the necessary work up front, right? Because if you want to change the way people work together, that's scaling deep. That's challenging things that people don't think about on a day-to-day basis. Giving them time to think and reflect together is often seen as waste, I would think, in certainly in the public sector and large organizations. Yeah. And so I often have likened it to, building a skyscraper. Somebody who doesn't know anything about building a skyscraper asks you to build a skyscraper. And in their mind, they're thinking you have to go high. You're going up. And they come and they check on the work site and you're going down. You're like, that's not the direction we're supposed to be going in. Why are you digging down? And it's like, well, because the higher you want to go, the deeper we have to dig. Right. And this work, I feel like when it comes to innovation or just changing, organizational culture, requires that deep work and making time to build that foundation so that you can achieve the height that you're aiming for. It's difficult to find that time. So you just find it in small ways, I think.
It's interesting. I want to talk more about your personal development as a leader in ShiftFlow and things in a second. There's just one thing to point out here. It's interesting maybe bringing some of the international dimension to this in terms of, obviously there's a Canada story around open government and changing institutions. In the UK, there's an interesting time. So we just had a former Prime Minister saying the public sector can't innovate. We actually had trusts and foundations abolishing themselves rather than try to reform themselves anymore. It seemed like Lily Chase story. In terms of with this open government agenda in Canada, is your sense that if this already gains traction, you'll be able to reform the institutions that are there? Or do you think eventually you're going to have to create new ones to be genuinely collaborative? Or is it too early to tell? Is it still, do we need to sort of experiment for a while first?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I would say we have to experiment some more first. And, it may be possible to create those new institutions within the old, right? And sort of within the shell of the old. And I think that's kind of what we have to do and how we have to do it. We shouldn't actually be completely reforming our institutions like, I think that our institutions deserve a level of respect and care, because they're really about stability. And so the way in which we figure out how to do things differently, how to restructure them, needs to be experimental, and needs to be start with safe to fail experiments, and it needs to be treated more as an organism, you know, than a machine that just needs to have its parts switched out. Which is why I kind of gravitate more to the sort of social movement side of things. It's like, because we're talking about people at the end of the day.
Quite an organic kind of
and it's
approach.
organic.
Yeah, fascinating. So you've gone through that whole journey of kind of reforming institutions, building movements, and then you're going into this thing of setting up your own agency and operation in ShiftFlow. So tell me about that journey. Just what made you take the step of setting up your own place, and then how have you found that journey so far?
The thing that really motivated me to start this journey is my experience inside government, as well as working with government for those 5 years previous. On the inside, you get a different perspective on this bureaucratic indifference that citizens often face when they're trying to get something done in their lives, and you can see why it's happening, and it's much larger than any individual. And so, my whole career, as you know, has been about serving the public, serving people. How do we figure out how to do that better, so that people can live their best and fullest lives? And so I was motivated to start ShiftFlow to help these organizations find ways of creating more life-affirming programs and services. And how do you start to realign your organization in order to do that? At a lower level, for the user, I'm thinking I want ShiftFlow to be the team I needed when I got that huge mandate in the government. When you're handed this transformational mandate, and perhaps with very little budget or perhaps very little direction, because the reality is nobody really knows how to do this. I want to build that team that I would have needed to accelerate my program.
Yeah, make things happen quicker. It's a really interesting thing. So tell me, what are you kind of excited about just now? I mean, this could be wicked problems that you think are just really worth solving, or it could be opportunities that you're spotting in different places. What are you excited about when you walk in, or walk over up to your desk at least?
It's always wicked problems.
Okay.
First of all, I and this movement towards mission oriented innovation, I'm really hopeful that more and more governments, larger enterprises, are going to start adopting this approach to help, diverse and distributed actors start aligning themselves around solving these problems. And I really think that the heart of solving these big problems is helping organizations transform. I think this is that meso level that we can start to address to help organizations improve their capability of solving some of these intractable problems, and just being more adaptable to changes in the environment. And so this is sector agnostic.
Okay.
So I'm really excited about that. And as far as ShiftFlow is concerned, I'm really excited about marrying social technologies with digital technologies and design.
Okay.
To achieve this work.
Do you see? Is it a happy marriage, like kind of mission orientation in institutions and the kind of social movement stuff you've said in the past? Do you see that quite naturally coming together?
Absolutely. I mean, this is the sort of the North Star kind of approach, right? And if we can sort of train our focus on that, and then it becomes easier to organize.
So the now comes to the bit in the Label Sessions Presents podcast where I need to ask you some quite random rapid fire questions that hopefully get us to know you a little bit better in different ways. Yeah, for people who are just listening to the audio, he just took a swig of water there just to prepare himself. Must have held to come. So I mean, the first one up is an easy one though. But where do you go to feed your brain creatively?
Ooh. Oh man.
Easy but deep.
Yeah, right off the top of my head is actually LinkedIn, funny enough. Like, I'm just, that's kind of the easiest, lowest barrier thing, just consuming. I have a really amazing feed of really amazing network of people who just sharing the coolest stuff all the time.
It took me a while to realize this. LinkedIn is actually really good if you get rid of all the annoying people. It just takes a while to curate your feed.
Curate that network.
Yeah. Number 2, the next one is, what do you think in the world is overhyped right now?
Oh my gosh. There's always something, isn't there?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's lots of stuff going around just now. But is there anything, maybe you don't see it because you got rid of all the assholes on your feed, but like, is there anything keep popping up?
Oh man, I mean, the metaverse was certainly overhyped. And I want to say AI is overhyped, and I guess it depends on what you're reading.
Yeah.
But I think like in some pockets, I'm like, you're not paying enough attention to this, and then other pockets, I'm saying, you're overhyping this thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you've led lots of change, actually, in some pretty tough organizations. You don't have to like name any, but some of them look quite hard in terms of making change happen. What tips would you give to leaders who are trying to make a big change happen?
Oh, this is a great one. For me, what I learned in the past is it's all about networks. And again, the Rogers innovation curve really helped me kind of in a Zen way, helped me figure out how do you start small and work together to finish big. And I think starting small is probably the biggest thing. I think you need to appreciate the small and systems change, and the innovation diffusion curve really helped me. So it's at all levels of the organization, find those innovators and early adopters and convene them as frequently as you can to start showing the way.
Okay.
Show, don't tell. Show, don't tell.
Yeah, very nice. So I can't imagine because you're so affected, but sometimes it might be that you're procrastinating at some point in your working day. Which website do we find you on?
Procrastinating?
Yep.
Okay, well, I already said LinkedIn. What website do you find me on procrastinating?
But maybe it is LinkedIn. Maybe LinkedIn is just giving you all the goodness, but also the distraction.
Just give me all the goodness. Yeah. But I feel like that's kind of like I'm usually finding something that I can apply to my work. Any website talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I am a sucker for.
Really?
Yeah. If you want to find me procrastinating, it's me learning a bunch of stuff that is useless about the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Is it really useful? Useless though? Maybe it's inspiring you in some way. A superhero.
Well, I certainly put my partner to sleep, and I don't think she wants to watch any more movies with me because I'm like, here's a fact, but the metaphor of the cinematic universe and also how the production teams created that universe for the cinema, so much to learn there.
I think you might go on to this next one. This is the second last one. But what do you do when you're not working?
When I'm not working, I'm always finding a way to work, I guess, because I'm working it into the cinematic universe. No, when I'm not working, I'm spending time with my kids. We're hiking, camping, spending time by any body of water, lake, ocean, river, whatever. Or we're playing some kind of sport. We're really into baseball, international football, and golf more recently, which I'm terrible at.
Okay, just take a while to get good.
In the winter, Fortnite.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. It's all very public spirited that it turns into shooting people online. So,
It's really good stuff. It's really good stuff.
Okay, and then the final question, and this is a simple question, but what I do find is with people, after we've asked it, your answers to this will live with you and will come to you tomorrow morning. So I don't know, we'll build up to it, but it's the last one.
Thank you.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how weird are you?
Oh, nice. Oh, yeah. It's relative, isn't it? But I'll go with an 8.
Okay, quite high.
Yeah.
Quite high.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. If we want to, later do a sequel, I can move the needle a little bit on my weirdness.
Well, I hadn't thought about that. Actually, that's the thing. We should come back to these interviews a year later and go on as the year makes you more or less weird. It's like, I don't know. We can find out what the factors are and maybe, build some kind of analysis on it.
Yeah.
So concludes another episode of Label Sessions Presents. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the podcast no matter your platform of choice. And of course, start your journey today with us at labelsessions.com.